think things should be okay. Although I am hearing weird sounds from behind me. Hopefully this is all going to work out. Oh, hang on a second. Okay, sorry about that. I don't think I actually muted the headset there. The puppy is feeling a little bit of foot anxiety. The aforementioned Walter, if you happen to be a member of the Sublime Text Discord, so we got a little bit of a slow start here. And hello, fellow Sublime Text Fanatics. Welcome to tonight's live stream. This is officially designated as the No Definite Plans live stream because I wasn't entirely sure what to work on tonight. And I did ask for some suggestions in the Discord earlier this morning, and Keith Hall, my good friend Keith Hall, King Keith, as you might know him if you're a member of the Sublime Text uh, packages repository or Discord or forum, had some ideas, and I pondered a little bit of how to maybe go about them, but I couldn't come up with a conclusive thing to do or a suggestion for, well, not a suggestion for, a method for doing what he suggested as possible plugin ideas, except for one which has already been done, which makes that a little bit less interesting. So I did come up with another thing. So we're going to try that tonight, and hopefully this is all going well. I heard that there was a new version of OBS 25.0.3, but in the level of weirdness, the website for OBS Studio thinks that it's only a Windows version, and there's not even releases for this thing on GitHub where the source code is. So I'm not sure what the deal is, what's happening there. So I investigated it for a little bit and thought maybe we'll just go ahead and leave that alone until we know that this is all doing what we expect it to be doing here. Maybe they're not releasing it for Linux and Mac OS explicitly because they know that there's something wrong. Hang on. Kind of getting excessive CPU action here. I'm not sure that I've ever noticed that before. We'll just kind of have to keep an eye on that. I think it's a little warmer in here than it normally is as well. I do have a new machine to replace that one. In any case, the idea that I had for tonight's live stream, and we'll see how well it goes, is I am, if you follow me on YouTube, you probably know that I spend a lot of time on Stack Overflow and the Sublime Text Discord, and also in the forum, looking for questions to answer. And sometimes, I've joked a few times with Keith in the past that I wish there was some sort of plugin or package for Sublime that would let me know while I'm working on something that there's a question that someone is waiting for an answer for over on the forum, or a response or something along those lines. Because often when I'm working on something, I have a bug that's somewhat intractable. And I wish that I had a way to, distract myself without having to manually keep looking over to see. And so I think we're going to try a little something with that tonight, something that could talk up to the Sublime Text forum and let us know if there's any new messages. And I will say that I did a tiny amount of pre-checking into whether or not this was even feasible because I don't think it would be an exciting live stream when we're going to be going for 2 hours and then we discover 10 minutes in that the thing that I want to try doesn't work. So I did do just enough pre-checking to see that there's probably something that we can make out of this. So what that means is I think it's technically possible to pull the information down. I'm not entirely sure how we might actually present it inside of Sublime, but one thing at a time, right? So we're gonna do that as the thing tonight, and I'm gonna try to make one quick little change to something else first, something that we worked on last week, if I can remember how that all worked out. So let's go ahead and enough of this rambling up at the top here. Let's jump on into the actual stream itself. Now, I have managed to set up a few things over here, and I've done some testing. I think it mostly works, but let's go ahead and give her a try, shall we? Hey, hello, fellow Sublime Text Fanatics. OdatNurd here. Welcome to the part of the stream where we pretend that I didn't just talk live for some number of minutes before the stream actually started. Welcome to this live stream. This is the live stream for March 24th. I remember that because it's the day my dog had to have his special treat, which happens once a month. And it is stream 58, the no definite plan stream, streaming because we can. This actually seems to be a thing that a lot of people are doing now with the world situation. So hopefully this all works out because in my pre-flight checkup, uh, YouTube over on my browser here decided for a little while that it didn't know how to talk to anything, even though that laptop over there, which I use as my live stream control, actually managed to pull this off without too much of a problem. So we'll see what is happening there. So what are we going to do tonight? Well, first of all, we're going to test something out here because I spent a bunch of time after the last stream trying to manage to set stuff up here. And I'm not entirely sure what this is actually going to do. So let's go ahead and push it and see. Hello, Ashwin. I'm going to push a key binding and we're going to see if something manages to appear here because it was sort of hit or miss when I was testing it originally. And to be honest, I can't quite remember what exactly it's going to do. Let's find out. Nothing? Let's try it again, shall we? Still nothing, huh? All right then, be a jerk. Oh, actually, I think I discovered that maybe I need to push this button over here. Hey, check it out. Now it's doing something. Tweet video suggestions to this guy, that thing. I can't look in things. Anyway, I have a couple of other ones there, but I wanted to test to see how well it would work. And it turns out not as well as it used to before I started using studio mode, but I kind of like studio mode, so a little bit more work has to go into that. I also set up my ops so that I could script it because it seems like it might be a neat thing to have a continuous, every 5 minutes or so, got a question, ask in the comments kind of thing, blipping up on the screen somewheres. So we're over here in this now. Do we remember the name of that file that I saved that plugin in last week? I can't remember. Oh, yeah. The new Sublime merge. Because the thing I'm going to try to do here is just quickly modify my local copy of HyperHelp to do the thing that I started doing last week in last week's stream, but then never had the time to actually do. So let's go ahead and add a new tab here and swap it over to my user package. That one. I got 22 unstaged files, do I? Oh, how many of them are untracked? Yep. It's going to be one of those. Empty, empty, empty. Syntax I probably don't need. A syntax I probably don't need. What's that one even for? I can't remember. Remember that time we did the CSS thing? This is the problem with keeping all of your plugins in your user package while you're working on them. I have to go through regular things. This macro is named delete me, so I'm going to go ahead and do that. Input handler test. I remember when we did that. That was fun. Relative Python exec. That was cool. Sample. I have a PostScript file in here for some reason. That's weird. Um, we'll go ahead and we'll leave that there until I remember what the reason for that is. It's a big one. Scope navigate. Message input handler. Listener build. That looks like something I remember doing sometime. Jump the selection in the file to the next or previous given scope based on the current cursor location. That sounds like something I helped with someone. Show at top. That's the one. Whoo, boy, good thing I didn't just assume that was going to work, right? Good grief. Okay, well, now that I've done that, it doesn't really matter because we're going to hop over to this thing anyway. And we're going to do that again. We're going to go to show at top because this is a little thing that I was trying to do for the hyperhelp displaying help. Man, this window was busy. Tried to put a wave emoji. You know, we have some friends that are glass sculptors, for lack of a better term. Bling squared, cute glass. They do cute little glass sculptures out of. Uh, Basically, they started off with beadworking and ended up with cool little characters. We select have a lot of their stuff. Their living mostly derives from being able to go to like Emerald City Comic Con and other Comic Con things like that, and that's all shut down now. So they've gone back to Twitch, which is something they used to do a lot before they got into the show thing, to try to draw in extra crowds. So we've been spending a lot of time watching them streaming, and if there's one thing I've noticed is that chatting in live streams never seems to do quite what you expect, particularly on Twitch, where there doesn't seem to be nearly as many emojis, which I guess is because you need to give them money to get at that sort of thing. Um, and now I'm all confused-rated about what tabs are what here. So in any case, yeah, I'm not surprised that that doesn't necessarily do what you expect. I'm always sort of surprised when I use the emoji button that it doesn't end up to be a color emoji on YouTube either. That always strikes me as a little weird too. I got a lot of open files here. This is the actual help, so let's just stick that over there because we're probably going to need that in a minute. And that's probably the thing I'm actually looking for. Why is this changed? Oh, I have a build number in here when I'm not supposed to. That doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Let's go ahead and save that, shall we? Close it up. And Sublime module, help authoring. That time I was working on stuff. Right on. Hyperhelp focus. I'm going to just very temporarily say, let's see, if it's a position, if it's an int, it's going to turn it into a region. If it's that, it's going to turn that. All right, so let's go ahead and just do this temporarily, and we will do that and indent that over. This is something that I was actually going to do off stream, but so there's going to be more work that's related here. Now, these things are all going to be not view, but, well, yeah, not that one, not that one. Oh, not that one either. Go back. Self.view. And it's not actually location, it's position. Basically, this is going to make it so that when we jump to a help topic, using something like this, that it shows up at the top of the window instead of down there in the middle of the window instead. Well, at least that's the theory. Because I think that's going to make it in the stream a little bit nicer. That's why I want to do it for the video series I'm about to start recording for the other channel, which is linked down in the description of this video. Subscribe to it if you like videos. I feel like I should say that more. And let's see, that's probably going to do what we want. Probably. Needs to be a little bit more testing there. But to test it out, we're going to go ahead and quit and restart this bad boy. And let's see what happens. So now, if I was to do this and pick, I don't know, like this, well, that didn't do nearly as much as I thought it was going to, if I'm being perfectly honest. That's weird. I'm only gonna worry about this for a couple of minutes, and then we're gonna give it a miss. Doing a thing. All right, I'm gonna quit and I'm gonna restart that again. Because that's the best way to get your dependencies to reload, don't you know? So that seems like it's all good. Let's go ahead and clear the console. We're gonna jump to, let's say, well, actually, we could, view.classify. It doesn't think it's doing it. I'm pretty sure that this is the command that's actually used for this. So this is weird as all get out. But, I only care so much at this point. So let's go ahead and swap back to the other thing. Well, I'll go ahead and put this back to, what I expected it to be in the first place, which is the thing that it's doing anyway. And we'll give it a quit and a restart just to make sure that that doesn't confuse us later on in the stream. Okay, so we're actually going to just start with a whole new window here, and we can get rid of this one. So now that I've done that, we can see that I have this window over here, which I'll just go and actually, I'm probably not gonna. Yeah, we'll just leave that. If you watch the introduction-y part of this thing, what we're gonna try to work on tonight is something that will. Let's see if I create a tab and zoop it over here like this and maximize it up. If we go to, say, for example, the Sublime Forum, where I spend a fair amount of my time, and it looks ridiculously big on this monitor with a resolution set like this. I mean, I do like to zoom it in a little bit, but that's a little bit ridiculous. So one of the things that, I like to distract myself with throughout the day and in the evening and while I'm working on stuff is popping over here to the forum to see if there's any questions that anybody has that I can potentially answer. And I also have a link to Stack Overflow that will take me to the Stack Overflow page where it shows all of the Sublime questions. So if someone has a question with Sublime, I can answer those. And of course, I have a link up here, the opened up the Discord. It goes on the other monitor to see. Normally, I get notifications when that happens. And sometimes I'm working on something and I wish that there was something there to distract me because it's a bug I don't want to think about right now. And so I go over and check. But Keith and I, King Keith from the Discord and the forum and whatnot, have joked a few times. What if there was a package, excuse me, that checked the forum page for us here to see if there was a new post, and then if there was, we could do something in Sublime to remind us. And then you could be sitting over here doing something, and something happens to let you know that hey, there's posts happening over on the forum, and then you could go over to it. Now, I've joked about that a bunch, and tonight, for lack of better options, because I wasn't entirely sure how to do the things that Keith recommended when I asked for suggestions earlier. I thought about it for a little bit, but nothing immediately came to mind. Is what if we did something like that? And I did a tiny 15 minutes worth of pre-checking on this, so that's why I have this other window that's open on that monitor with just a couple of notes in it on what I did, because I wanted to verify that it was technically possible to do what I wanted to do easily, and not something that would be one of those cases where we get into the stream and realize, 10 minutes in that I don't know how exactly to pull this off, and then what do we do for the rest of the time. So I do have a little bit of notes over there that goes over, that sort of has, the things that I learned, but I'm not just going to hand wave all of that. We're actually going to go through that here, because one of the things in order to do this, there's a few things we could do, and one is clearly this is um, a web page, right? And web pages are HTML. We could request the page. We could pull down the HTML. We could try to scrape it somehow to know that there's new posts. Yes, exactly. It could be possible by setting up a scraper in a cron job, and that's something that's probably possible, but I've looked into in the past. I've looked into scraping a web page that way, specifically for the Sublime documentation, because I do sort of mirror the API documentation in Snappy. And eventually I ended up with manually recreating everything because it needed a little bit of formatting anyway. And then I actually just have a cron job that checks every day to see if the documentation has changed. And if it tells me it has, I can compare what it looks like now to what it looked like last time because I have it in a Git repository, and it'll show me exactly what changed between one version and the other, and then I know exactly what file to go to and modify. So not as automatic as it could be, but the documentation doesn't really change all that much, so that seemed like a good trade-off for me. But couldn't really find, beautiful soup is something that you can use to scrape a web page, but then you have to be familiar with the structure of the thing. But something that could be handy here because it's made for this very purpose is an RSS feed of some sort, right? Because RSS, and I don't know offhand what that stands for, except for, news feed thing, is all set for showing you lists of things that, changes. You can pump it into your newsreader, and your newsreader tells you when things are done. So if we had something like that, then we could totally create a plugin that pulls down that RSS file and does something with it. And it turns out, and I've known this for a while, which is why I had this idea for a plugin or a package or whatever it turns out to be, is that the forum software that Sublime uses for their forum is Discourse, and it actually has an RSS feed built into it, although it's not immediately obvious. All you have to do is find some URL on the site that actually is loading a page, not a top level thing like this. Like, say, for example, top, or what I normally have it on is latest and all categories. We could do something like this to see just general discussion, or this to see just Sublime merge, but I always have it on latest and all categories because I like to help where possible. I don't constrain myself to one particular category. So if you were looking at latest or any other URL like that, you can just add .rss to the end, and you end up with an RSS feed. So we could easily parse this bad boy up, and it's in XML, so there's a libxml in Python, so that's something that we could do. It's RSS, so it's definitely structured. It's not more freeform like HTML is, because HTML could look like anything to get the presentation that it wants in the page, right? And from one day to the next, the person that creates it could wildly change that behind the scenes. I presume that messes your scraper up. I don't know. Like I said, I don't have a lot of familiarity with that. And something else that you can do is not only RSS, you can also throw a JSON on the end, and you end up with a JSON version of the page as well. And I checked into both of these. You sort of have to download this and pump it into a JSON formatter to be able to make heads or tails of it. And what I discovered was, for the purposes of what I want to do, the RSS feed has more of what I want. For example, this starts off with the user's key that has, I think, a list of every user that's represented in any of the things that are currently listed on the page, where you get to see their user ID, their username, their actual name, uh, you know, some sort of template for where their avatar comes from, which I assume is something you could use in a URL. And over here, though, in the RSS feed, we end up with the actual contents of posts that we're doing something with. And this is HTML, and we can sort of display HTML in Sublime, in mini HTML, particularly in Sublime 4, which is what we're using here, or Sublime 4K if we're deciding to go that way. And I got something in my eye, and that's kind of unfortunate. So this seems like a better way to go to get the information that we want, right? And then I looked to see, I did a little Google search for parsing RSS feeds in Python. And I did some sort of search and ended up with something called feed parser. And that's already showing some things that I had some problems with. And there's this thing here where we can easily pull some stuff out. Now, this isn't actually the page that I found. I found some sort of tutorial point thing that had like 3 lines of stuff. But you can see there's like quite a bit of documentation for this. Now, this is some sort of library that we're going to need in order to do this, right? And that seemed like something that we might want to do in the stream because often there might be a Python library that you want to use in your plugin, and how do you actually pull that off? And there's a few things that we could try. And one is this link here is the list of all of the dependencies that are currently on package control, or at least all of the ones that are in the main package control repository file on GitHub. I think it might be missing some of the ones that individual users have added in their own feeds. If we were to look for feed parser, we're not finding it in here. So if there was something in here, we could make our package, pull this in, and then package control would install the thing, and we'd be good. Now, that's not something that we can do here, right? I also checked to see if there's just something in Python 3.8, since that's what's available to us in Sublime 4K, and that didn't seem to be the case. So I ended up with feed parser. So we need to do something with this. Now, there's a couple of different ways, apart from a dependency, that you can actually get a Python library of some sort into Sublime for your own purposes. And it works best when it's a library that's primarily just all Python files and no native libraries, because that runs you into very specificness of if there's a native binary, which would be like a shared object, a .so file on Linux, or a DLL, a dynamic link library on Windows, or a dilib on Mac OS. And Mac OS is only 64-bit, and Windows is 32-bit and 64-bit, and for right now, Linux is 32-bit and 64-bit. And you have to have a version of that binary, that dynamic library, whichever platform, compiled using the same version of Python that Sublime is using, which means you necessarily can't just use pip to install the thing, because you have to be having the exact version of Python that that person was using. So you generally have to compile them manually yourself. And then in that, you have to make sure that you're using the same compiler options as the Sublime developers were using, because otherwise the ABI, the application binary interface, might be different between the library and the Python interpreter, and that blows up in weird ways. I mean, it's obviously possible, but that is like a lot of work. And if somebody hasn't already done it for you, you're really taking on a lot there. Now, if your Python library is just Python files, then you're already miles ahead, because Sublime will load Python files every day of the week. And there's sort of a dual case here, because some Python libraries will have multiple files inside of them, and they may reference other parts of their own internal package by using from dot something import, a relative import from where it currently is. And if they don't do that, then they're using an absolute, because they assume they're being installed in a Python installation, and that you would be able to say from cool project.bob import symbol, and Python's always going to be able to find it. And those sorts of libraries are trickier to use in Sublime without modifying their source to make them relative imports. Or at least that used to be the case. It's actually a little bit better now, as we'll see in just a second. Now, this is why I played with this a little bit before the stream started, to make sure that this is something that we could actually do. And it turns out that this feed parser jiggy is actually just one single Python file. So it's like the best case scenario for this operation. So all we need to do is take this Python file and put it somewhere, and we're good to go. And there's a couple of different places we can do that. Now, one way we could do that, I suppose, is to find the actual source code for this thing somewhere. What I tend to do for something like this is hop into a terminal, and I think I have a temp directory here. No, I'll make a temp directory here in my home directory. I'll actually do that. And then we create a virtual environment so we can install that library here so I don't have to go hunt it down somewhere else. And this is where I have a little bit of notes here. We might say virtual env, I don't know, parsi. for example, and set myself up a thing, and then we can say we've got to activate that, right? So you probably got to say parse bin activate like so. Is that not how you do that? Oh, right. Sorry, you got to source it. Yeah. Now that is the thing. So if I say which Python, it's the one from Parsi. That's good. Now I can just say pip install and what's the thing called again? Feed parser. And again, I'm looking over here at my little cheat sheet because I do not normally use Python outside of Sublime. So I know what virtual environments are. I just don't do it enough to know the commands off the top of my head. I'm going to go ahead and install this bad boy, and it's dropped some stuff in here. So now we should be able to go into Parsi, and then we can go into lib, and then we can go into Python 3.6, which is the version I happen to have installed here, and not Python version 3.8, because I needed a specific version to compile plugin support into OBS. And then only after I had gone to all of that trouble did I realize that the OBS developers recommend that you never under any circumstances use Python as a scripting language, use Lua. So that was a gigantic waste of time. But I digress. Those guys have been making me angry lately. And if we go into site packages, we can totally see feedparser.py. We can even take a peek into this thing. So this is the library, version 5.2.1, and it requires version 2.4 or later, so that's nice. This will definitely work for us no matter how we decide to work with our plugin. And the nice thing is that it doesn't have any top level relative imports. All of the required modules, as you can see here, are coming directly from the top level Python interpreter. So this is absolutely ripe for being able to do what we want to do. Now, there's a couple of different things that we can do here. I'm going to, well, we'll just leave that there for the time being. That's fine. And I'll move this thing over to here and maybe even maximize it so you have a better chance of seeing, because I always forget my big fat head is over here in the corner of this window. I feel like I need a hidden window that tracks the real window to let me know. So how could we actually go about doing something with this? And generally, the two ways to pull this off, well, three ways if you count turning it into an actual dependency for package control, is to actually put this in a package. So what we could say is, if I go to the packages folder, this is my packages folder for Sublime here, and let's say we created a package and we named it Forum Reader, for example, and we go into Forum Reader. Now, we could take that Python file and drop it here directly into our package. But if we do that, it's in the top level of the package, and Sublime will think that it's a plugin because all Python files in the top level of a package are a plugin. That's probably not what we want. So then we would have to say something like make dir feed parser, like so, and then go into feed parser and then copy from home temp parse lib python 3.6 site packages feed parser.py here. So now it's here inside of that thing, which means over here in Sublime, if I remember the name of the package we used, Forum Reader, we could say from Forum Reader, the name of the package, dot the name of the thing inside, which is feed parser. That's the name of the directory, dot feed parser. Actually, we probably don't want to do it that way. Let's just say that. Well, no, I'll say import that as feed parser, let's say. This is how we might actually do this. And now I have the feed parser module. It's telling me where it's coming from, and I could say feed parser dot parse, and it'll probably throw some sort of error. In any case, we can see I have this. You have to do a little bit of more fiddling to actually get at the thing that you actually want. So that's one way to do it. And this works because this is a Python file that doesn't need to relatively or absolutely import anything other than what comes with Python. Like I said, sometimes you'll come up with a library like this that's got 5 or 6 files and it needs to import symbols. And instead of saying from dot dot sibling file import, it assumes it can load it from the module, and then that's not going to work. Not unless you fiddle with this thing, which, don't fiddle with the Python system path. It's not a good idea. So that's one thing that we could do here if we wanted to put it inside of our package, and that's referred to as vendoring the package. The other thing that we can do related to this, and we're not going to do it here, is you could make a dependency package. And in that case, you'd make a package named feed reader, make a directory inside of it named all, and then make another directory or put the feed parser file inside of there. And that will allow you to, Sublime's will be able to load it after you do all of the stuff you need to do to make package control represent a dependency. And that's not something we want to fiddle with here. So we're not going to do that here, but that's what you would do if you wanted to use this in, say, multiple packages and not just have one copy vendored inside of your own package, if you want to share it out with others. There are downsides to that. If there's a dependency version of feed parser, then you probably behooves you to keep updating it as that particular dependency changes, which may or may not be a problem. Other issues are my tablet turning itself off because I didn't get my finger onto it in time, but also um, excuse me. I feel like I got something caught in my throat there. Um, that whole idea of virtual environments in Python or the node modules file folder in Node.js revolves around the idea that different versions of packages can exist and different versions of packages might be subtly incompatible with each other in one way or another. So if you were to create a dependency out of something, then everybody that uses the dependency always has to use that version. And that means if you bump the version, everybody that's using the dependency, they're now depending on the newer version, and their code might not handle that well. So that's something to think about. And it's one of the reasons why I tend to not like dependencies if I can help it. A dependency can have dependencies, but the package control won't install them. A package can have more than one dependency listed, and then package control will list all of them, but you can't have a record in a dependency that tells package control that it also needs to install something else. And in a similar way, you can't make a package depend on another package. You can't say, in order to install package dev, please also install this other package too. Those are not currently allowed as things. So that might be another reason there. If your package, if your dependency relies on some other library, then you may require having to, put documentation somewhere telling people that that's the case. But what we're going to do here, and I'm going to just remove that because I did a copy for that, right? If we were to go to the data directory for our copy of Sublime, and remember, if you ever want to get to the data directory, go into Sublime, say browse packages. That's going to open your file browser, which is going to take a while because there's a network share on the device on the wall behind me that needs to wake up the hard drive before it can be scanned. The packages folder is always inside of the data directory, so do that, go up one level, and you're at the data directory. Works whether you're on Windows, Mac OS, or Linux, whether you have a portable version or a not portable version, whether you use a sandbox copy like I do sometimes. That will always take you to the place where the current running copy of Sublime thinks the data directory is, which for me is here. And inside of here, there's this folder named lib. And inside of lib, there's these folders here. Now, Python 3.3 is something that used to be there for Sublime Text 3. Will added it quite some time ago in preparation for the moment we have right now, which is multiple plugin hosts, but he never actually got a chance to use it. And now that multiple plugin hosts are here, they're 3.33 and 38. So I'm not sure if this would actually be recreated if you had a fresh data directory. I'm not entirely sure, but these are the ones that Sublime Text 4 is actually looking inside of. And if we looked inside of Python 38, there's nothing exciting in here, but we could actually do that same copy if I found the thing. And now it's here. So I should be able to say import feed parser. And it worked. And then I can say feed parser.parse and X. And that will actually do something because that's the way that I planned on doing it. So that's the way I originally tested it out. Downside to this method is right now, there's no method to automatically put files into this lib folder. If you've ever followed Will on the Discord talking about things that are going to change in the next versions of package control, particularly in regards to how it installs dependencies and how dependencies will work now that there are two different versions of Python that are bundled, two different plugin hosts, I should say, rather running different versions of Python bundled with Sublime 4. One of the things that he's going to do is swap the way that dependencies are installed so that they'll be installed into these directories here, the Python 3.3 or Python 3.8, as appropriate instead of making them pretend packages in the packages folder. And just to show you what that's like, there's a few packages in here that are actually dependencies, and one of them, for example, is Sublime Lib. So this looks like it's a package. The giveaway is it's a lowercase name. That tends to be how these things work. And inside of here, there's a folder named st3 because this only supports Sublime Text 3. And inside of there is a confusingly named Sublime Lib folder. And if we look inside there, there's a Python library in here. And if we were to come back to here and scroll back to where I did the thing, I guess it's not there. If we import sys and do sys.path, this is the list of all of the places where the internal Python interpreter is going to be looking for things that you import, and it's going to look for them in the version of Python that's bundled with Sublime. It's going to look in the Python 338 lib folder, and it's going to look in the Python 3 lib folder in the installation folder. This is where you're going to find, I believe the plugin files that represent Sublime's API. Like so, and it pulls in Python 38, and it also pulls in the packages folder. Excuse me. So this is how it's managing to find stuff inside of the dependency itself. Excuse me. So that is going to change in some version, and then these things will be installed here. So for right now, this is something that you would have to install manually. Let's go back into that lib Python 38 directory like so. This is where I put this here. Now, if you were following me during November, while I didn't live stream that particular thing because I had a lot going on, but one of the projects was the YouTuberizer. That required a lot of Python libraries to be able to interact with OAuth 2 and Google. And I did the exact same thing to get those libraries as I did here. I installed them all into a virtual environment and then just copied them over. Sometimes they're single Python files like this. Sometimes they're actually a directory that is a module that has more things in it. That's more of a Python thing than a Sublime thing. So that one's a little bit out of my wheelhouse for describing things. But now we have the ability for our little package here to have access to that. Now I'm going to very quickly, again, I can't remember what I named that stupid thing. Forum reader. Let's go ahead and add this to the current thing so that we can actually do something in here. And we'll touch forum.py, let's say, and then we can go ahead and open it up in here, and that'll be handy for us. So we want to import Sublime and import Sublime plugin like so. That seems to work. So right on. Now the next thing we need to do is actually use that library, and this is how I pulled that off. And I remember I said go to any URL inside of discourse and add .rss, except that it doesn't work for a directory. That's not going to work. You actually have to have the page that it's actually loading, which was latest. So that's going to give us the thing that we want for this. So we need to copy that. So we might, pop into the thing here and say the URL is equal to that. So now we can get that URL whenever we want. And then all we have to say is, I did already import the feed parser, right? So we can say feed parser dot parse and the URL that we're interested in parsing, and that is going to do what we want, and we might actually capture that value. And it took a second, and it's all done now. And then you might try to play with this object, but you find that nothing quite works because feed.entries is the entries in the RSS feed that it pulled down, and it's currently empty, which is weird because clearly this is not an empty file. And it took me a little bit to twig to what was going on there. But if we were to do this, you might notice this bad boy here. SSL certificate verify failed, unable to get local issuer certificate. So this one immediately sort of threw me for a loop because when it comes to this, I mean, I understand what certificates are and the blah, but when you do a very quick Google search for, hey, I'm getting this error out of feed parser, 100% of the results, as far as I can tell, say, oh, I see what you did. You installed Python, but you didn't install the certificates. So just go into your Python installation and install your certificates like so, and away you go. And I didn't install Python. It's kind of embedded into Sublime. So what do we do in that case? And it turns out there is this Python library called Certify. And it just so happens to come with Sublime Text 4 built in. And once you have that, you're gold, right? I mean, you have to know what to do with it. And there's this where method that tells you where the certificate is. So you can actually say, when you get to this, you can say something like, I can't quite remember. Let's see, because I didn't write the certificate file to actually use so that this thing knows what certificates to use, if I'm remembering how to do this correctly, and I may not be. Because I went through a couple of iterations and I only made a few notes. If I said certify.where was the way to do that. Shoot, did I not? Oh, oops. And again, I'm not 100% sure that's actually what I pulled. Yeah, I think what I remember now. I looked into how do I do this, and the ultimate result that came back was, why don't you try this weird monkey patch and then things will work? And when someone says monkey patch, I say, no, thank you. I'm not interested in destroying the world for everybody for my little toy. So I wasn't interested in that. But I happen to know from other things I've done that there's this URL lib thing, right? So I should be able to say URL lib dot URL open the URL. Nope, sorry, it's request, isn't it? But that throws the exact same error too. Now it turns out this is actually what the other thing is using behind the scenes. And I believe this is the one where you can say CA file is certify.where, telling it the certificate authority file, this is the one you want to load. This is where you're going to find all the certificates, use those to validate any SSL connections. And when you do it, it works. But you get this deprecation warning because certificate, authority, file, path, and default are deprecated, and you should use a custom context instead. And then you throw your hands up in despair because what the actual crap, man. But, a little bit more Googling. And again, this is taking me a lot longer to describe here because I was just doing it and it took me like 15 minutes to get to the point we're ultimately going to get at. You import the SSL library, not the SLL library. You can create your own custom context where you can say ssl.create default context. And this here, you can say the CA file is certify.where, like so. And now I have this custom context. And now when I come back to this line, instead of saying CA file is certify.where, we can say do 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 context, excuse me, context equals context. That should have been easier to remember. I got confused because I was looking at the line that I just pasted. And we can actually just say X is this. And now that seems like it might have worked. I have a client. If I read from it, I have me some XML. So all we really have to do in that case is to come back, do that thing again, open that URL. And then when we come to this, we get back to the thing way back here. And again, I could have just typed the thing. Instead of passing it the URL, we can just pass it the object that we did this in. And it will automatically pull that out. And it's taking a second or two. And then I could say feed.entries. And there's like a lot of them now. So this totally works. So we could say feed entries 0. And here's the first one. And we probably might want to say, do something fancier with that. And I actually had an example of something like this, because if we said feed.entries 0 dot or summary, we end up with the actual, oh, whoops, that's not how that works. This isn't a terminal. I fell for the old thing. This is the actual content that this person wrote, which is kind of hard to read because this is all kinds of HTML right now. But along with the summary, you can also look at the other thing that's interesting here is, I think, the title, if I remember correctly. Sublime Text application cannot be found within open with other application list in GNOME. And if we came back here and went back here and actually went to the forum, whoops, that is something that Sublime Text application cannot be found within open with other application list in GNOME. And if you click on that, there's some stuff in here. We can see here he's injected some images. And if we were to actually look over here in the, not in the terminal, because that would be stupid, but in here we can actually see, here's him linking the images. So we have some amount of information in this thing, right? And we could take this one step farther, because remember, we can say window.new HTML sheet, because we're in Sublime 4, to create a sheet that represents HTML. This takes 2 arguments. The first thing is going to be the title of the tab, and then the next one is going to be the content of the tab. So we could say feed.entries 0. That's the title of this thing. And let's go ahead and copy that out and drop it in here. And this is content. So that's the content of this, and we'll capture it into a variable so we can fiddle with it later if we want to. Whoop. What did I do wrong? What did I do wrong? Is that not? Oh, sorry, it's summary. Excuse me. I was thinking, I had the name of the variable stuck in my head. So there we go. Vanessa wrote posts to participants to read full topic. That's not as exciting as it could be. And this has everything to do with Sublime, and it's the implementation of HTML in here, remember, is mini HTML. It doesn't support entirely all of the HTML spec. And in particular, what it doesn't like is block quotes. So what we could actually do to fix that, and this is just something I did as a very quick hack, and we'll do it here again. If we replaced block quote with div, we end up with more stuff. I mean, we still have issues here because it hasn't downloaded the images to be able to display in here, should that matter. But if I was to just sort of, where's my mouse? Plug that over. You know what? Use the key binding. Don't try to use the mouse. And we could do something like this. Let's see how this all matches up. Vanessa wrote it, so that's good. Sublime Text application cannot be found within open other application list. Steps to reproduce. Now this is supposed to be a numbered list, but mini HTML doesn't support that, so it's just an unordered list instead. That's something that's listed as what will happen in the mini HTML documentation. Expected behavior, an image that we didn't download, actual behavior, an image that we didn't download, environment as a bulleted list. And there are 2 posts in this. Yes, there are. There's the Vanessa post and there's the Benjamin Schaff post. There's 2 posts and 2 participants. And this link, if we had the right thing, would allow us to view the full topic, which is, this is actually the URL to this thing up here. I would imagine if we were to actually look in the thing. Oops, I got to get some of this action going. Pardon me. Zoop, there's the link right there to the actual forum. So this actually seems like something that we could pull off. Now, there's a lot of stuff that has to happen here that, undoubtedly we wouldn't get to in a stream like tonight because, time being what it is and so forth. But the basics of what we want to do is actually possible. Now, what I actually did was say something like feed.entries.keys. Whoops, entries stream 0.keys to see what was actually in here. So we have a title detail, who wrote it, tags that'll tell you which of these sections of the forum it's actually in, summary detail, links that exist in the thing, and one of the things in here is ID. So if we were to do this, we end up with this very unique ID, which I would imagine is different for everything. Otherwise, life is terrible. 50234 for the first one, which is this thing. And that doesn't actually have a number. It's 50234. So I'm imagining that what we could do is create a plugin that pulls down this file and stores the result. And then it would say create a dictionary that keys. Technically, I guess we probably don't even need to do that, do we? What did you miss? That depends. What was the last thing that you heard me say? You might have to go back and look at the replay when all is said and done. Oops. I know what you mean about work, though. I was watching some live streaming earlier while I was trying to work, and normally nobody bothers me in the afternoon, but just because I was watching some friends do some stuff, of course, it went all doolally. What we've been working on here is essentially the stub code, which isn't actually in a plugin yet. I've just been playing with it in the console to actually pull down a forum post, in particular this one, by taking it from the RSS feed. Now, there's a few things that have to happen for this to actually work. If we wanted to display the contents of this thing like we're doing here in some fashion, then you need to massage the HTML a little bit because block quotes aren't a thing. And there's a block quote somewhere in here. I don't know where. I assume it's doing it for something like that. And that didn't work until we replaced the block quote tag with the div tag. So that's one thing you have to do. If you would also have to look to see what images exist and download them and rewrite the URLs to do something like this. And you might also want to actually have a handler that does something with these links to open them in a browser as well. But one of the things that this feed information gets, if we say feed.entries, let's say the length of feed.entries is 30. There's currently 30 things in this feed, which I guess is the top 30 latest items. And I haven't counted these, but it's kind of hard to track them because as you get closer to the bottom, more things load in, right? As a matter of fact, we're totally getting the magic of things happening on the forum right now. Each one of these entries has this ID value that uniquely represents it. So if at plugin startup you were to download this list and keep, if nothing else, just a list of the unique IDs for all of the topics that existed in that latest thing, then every 5 minutes you could download it again and see. And any of these things that have a topic that didn't that sorry, an ID that exists now but didn't exist then must be a new thing, right? And then we somehow trigger that to the user that that's something that they can do something with. Um, that's the part where this thing sort of falls down a little bit because I'm not entirely sure what the best way to do that is. I was just noticing the interestingness of if you have a regular tab focused, a regular sheet, you get to know things like the line and the column and the encoding and the line ending and the syntax that's used. And when it's an HTML tab, you don't, which, makes sense because HTML, it doesn't have any way for you to edit this thing. Um, so I guess we could, continue on with fleshing out how something like this might notify us of this. There's clearly a lot of things that have to happen here. So this is why I have some, the notes that I've been referring to over there, because we're going to want to import SSL. We're going to want to import certify. That's going to give us our certificates because a lot of these sites are SSL related. And we're going to want to import the feed parser library that we're going to actually do something with. Now, let's say we actually made a method here for load feed. And, well, we'll give it a URL parameter, but we're going to put up here URL is equal to this, because we're going to test it with the latest thing. And so that's latest.rss. And incidentally, I played around, like I said, with the JSON version of this. It's got a lot of information, but it doesn't seem to have as much detail about the actual entries as it does about the people that are saying things, at least as far as I could see with a quick look. So this seems like the nicer way to go. But if the information in the JSON file was enough, then you don't even have to fiddle around with this whole feed parser thing. So that would be nice. So we're going to do something in here. And I think we could probably use the same context. So let's say that. I'm not sure what the best way to do something like this is. This is probably an example of optimizing things when you don't need to. If not context, then context is equal to ssl.create default context for CA file equals, excuse me, certify.where. So this is the certify library, incidentally, is something that was added to Sublime as one of its built-in libraries in the 4000 build series. This is the Sublime 4 build, and it wasn't there before. And I was unclear about what this library was actually for until I started working on this, and it turns out it's a library where I believe essentially someone has taken the root certificates that ship with Mozilla and bundled them up into a Python library. So if you need access to those things, this is an easy way to get them. So it's nice that Sublime is creating that for us, and I imagine that's also going to make package control be a lot nicer because it's not going to try to do a bunch of stuff. Is feed parser Python 3.3 or later? It's actually Python 2.7 or something. Let's see. We'll double check because I know I looked at it, and lib Python 38. Feed parser requires version 2.4 or later, and it's one single file that does all of the stuff. I'm here in Vim, in the devil's editor, if you will, which was my editor of choice for the better part of 2 decades, and I still use it. But I tend to use Sublime for everything now. So the nice thing about this is feed parser it's the perfect library to vendor into your own package, or just in this case, just because it's easier, we're dropping it into that lib folder. It'll work with even Sublime Text 3. So this would technically work there, although Sublime 3 doesn't have a certify library, so you'd have to try to pull that in, and I'm not sure how easy that is. And now that we have a context, we can say feed is equal to feed parser dot parse. And oh yeah, we actually need to do the thing. Sorry. Stream. The feed parser dot parse method takes a file handle or a string of stuff, or a string that looks like a URL, if I remember correctly. So you can pass it the URL and it'll try to download it, or you can pass it the content of a downloaded URL, or you can pass it a file. I think that was a third thing that would allow it to read from. I can't remember if that one was exactly correct, but it doesn't matter, because if you feed parser.parse the URL from up here, because it's a secure thing, it automatically fails because of the way that it uses URL lib, which incidentally I probably forgot to include up here. I should probably say from import lib from, whoops, don't do that. That's not going to work. From urllib.request import URL open, just to make that a little bit nicer. Forgot where I was going with that. Yeah, I know it's broken. Feed parser.parse, the way that it uses URL lib, it can't handle SSL things, so that doesn't really matter. That's why we decided to do it this way with URL open and the URL that we were provided and context equals context, like so. And then we can pass this the stream of data that we got, and it'll read it from there, instead of having. This will allow us to open the URL ourselves and get the object that we can pass to this to actually get the data. And all of this stuff realistically should be in one of these type things, just to make sure. We might even say sublime.status message error loading feed URL. And that, and like so. Whoop, don't do it that way. But if that wasn't the case, then something actually worked, right? And so we could actually say print. Actually, let's do it the other way. This is, testing our way through building something up. Sublime.status message of, let's see, entries in feed, %d, and then we throw in a len feed.entries, like so. What do you mean there's no module named feed parser? Of course there's a module named feed parser. I already imported it. Oh, but you know what I didn't do? New file relative to current view, .python version. Any package that doesn't have a Python version file in it that tells Sublime to use Python version 3.8 will fall back to a Python version 3.3. And I put that library in the lib Python 38 directory. So that's not going to work. But now we're all okay. I forgot about that. My previous test, I did it in the user package, and the user package always runs in Python 3.8. So we technically have that going now. So if we were to say def plugin loaded and call load feed with the URL, then as soon as I save this, we should see it say entries in feed 30. So it's magically pulled that down and done something with it. Now, this is, 200% something that you shouldn't actually do in production code, because plugin loaded is accessing the API, and it's doing something that's taking a non-zero amount of time. So we're blocking other plugins from being able to do anything for whatever the period of time URL open takes and parse takes to actually pull down this data and to do something with it. But much like my YouTuberizer, I'm concerning myself with making it actually do something first and then worry about everything else, after that. Because you can really get into the weeds with doing things in a thread related or, asynchronous nature, And it's nice to have things actually working first and then do that. That you have less problems that way. At least that's been, my experience with, 2 decades of writing code with ridiculous levels of threads. Um, so we have this actually doing something. It's actually downloading the feed. Now, I presume we probably want this feed to stay around here somewhere too, right? So we probably want to say feed is equal to none, let's say. And we can go ahead and restructure this after we get a better sense for what it's going to be. I assume that will be fine. Now, the issue with this is every time we do it, it's pulling this file down. So the next thing we probably want to work on is maybe caching some of these results somewhere. And what's the best way to pull something like that off? Um, we know the name of our package. This is sort of something that we discussed last stream. What are the places that we could put something like this? Theoretically, we could put it in any folder that we want, anywhere on the person's hard drive, but this is just me speaking. If a Sublime Text package decided to put something in anywhere other than inside of the specific data folder that I've set aside for Sublime, I'd probably chase that guy down and whack him with a sack of doorknobs, um, or oranges as appropriate, depending what part of the world you're in. Sometimes oranges are more prevalent than doorknobs. Um, so that's not a thing. We could put it in the cache folder somewhere. That would work. Arguably a good idea because the cache folder is the place for storing caches. So why not something like that? And we can actually say sublime.cache path, and that will give us the location where the cache is. So if we had that path, we could create some sort of file. So just for the time being, I'm going to do that so that this doesn't reload the file every time we save the plugin while we're working on, excuse me, this next part. I am going to go ahead and do a little something like this, though, just to separate this stuff out a little bit. I find it makes things easier to read. I actually like plugin loaded to be first and not last, really. This whole 2 lines between functions thing is one of the few things about PEP8 format things in Python that I actually like, although it doesn't like when I make my line comments like this or like this, I think is how I normally do it. So, we fight each other over that. Now, let's say we want to actually cache the result of this somewhere, so we probably need some sort of, let's see, def load cache and save cache. Every time we do something, we can either load the data at startup or save it later. And this is really one of those situations where we end up probably finding ourselves saying, if we had an object that wrapped this would make life a lot better, and then you wouldn't have to do this weird business with globals. I even spelled that wrong, so that's probably going to be very unhappy. There we go. We'll go ahead and save that. Not that it really matters at this point. And we should probably also import OS. So if we were to load cache, now we need to come up with the name of a cache file, right? So we might actually have another method for cache file, which returns os.path.join and sublime.cache path. And what's the name of this thing here? Forum.cache. Whoops. Let's call it stforum.cache. And I like to put this sort of thing in a method so that everywhere that I need the file name, I can just call it. And again, when it's an object, it would be just like a member and you wouldn't have to do something funky like this. Important to note that Sublime.cache path can't be invoked until after or inside of plugin loaded. So if you put it in the top level, if I just said something like cache file here to get the cache file, then this isn't going to work because most of the API isn't available until after the plugin host loads, because the plugin host loads asynchronously to Sublime starting up, which is why you generally put logic like this being kicked off by plugin loaded. because that will get called whenever the plugin loads. If we have that, now what do we actually want to store into this cache? Let's say with open cache file yeeps write as file. We got to actually write something into this thing, right? Let's file.write data. So if we had something like that, actually writing something into this magic cache file at startup, well, for our purposes here, we can very quickly jam something like this in here. Do I still have feed in here? Yes. Feed dot entries is a list of things. So if I said EID for E in feed entries, would end up with a list of all of the actual items that were in here. If we actually did this as a dictionary instead, we could actually have these things be keyed by their ID value. And it's my supposition at this point that the fastest way to be able to determine if an entry in the RSS feed is one that we've seen before is to look at the ID values. And if it appears in that dictionary, we've seen it before. And if it doesn't appear in that dictionary, we haven't. Which is sort of an issue. We're going to have more logic in there, because if somebody says something inside of an existing post, then clearly, you know, we're not going to know that, and we might incorrectly think that nothing happened there. Otherwise, we'd just be finding new topics and not updates to existing topics. But I still think that's probably a way to go. So we're going to copy that. Now, if this actually worked, we could say save cache, and the cache we want to save is this. And if we did that and temporarily did this, then, oh, error loading feed URL. Crap. That might entirely be because I screwed up this call. If all, let's say I wouldn't be surprised if the reason why this didn't work is these two lines were funky. Yeah, okay, so that is definitely the problem. Can you not write? I guess probably the smarter way to pull this off is to not mask exceptions. Masking exceptions never a good idea, right? I can't imagine why it would be. And then something like that. Do I even need to do it that way? Probably not, huh? Right argument must be stir, not dict. Right on, right on. Okay. I'm going to imagine that I probably didn't need to actually do that part. I envisioned in my head that we'd actually display the message, but let's say we don't really care that much. So what we actually want to do in that case is import the JSON module here so that we can JSONify this thing. JSON.dumpString with, let's say, indent equals 2. That seems to have worked, so we will go back to commenting that out, but well, it's probably easier to do it this way, isn't it? Here's the file that we loaded. We'll even make it JSON. So There are 30 of these entries keyed by their ID, and then we have their title, the details of their title. So we can actually see some more information about what this thing is giving us here, which includes the name of the title and the base URL that it came from, what its actual value is, which appears to be that, so I'm not sure what that is. Written by Vanessa. There's also Vanessa in here, and the author detail is Vanessa. I don't profess to be any master about RSS feeds, but it's in the technical support part of the forum, so that's something that we can get with. There's the summary. And again, we actually get that in here twice. So I suppose that these outer values are the easier ones to use. And here we're being told that this is type text HTML and it came from there. And this is the value because maybe the feed contains text instead. Why not store the cache into a JSON file? Wouldn't that be easier? Yeah, it probably would be, but I didn't think of that until after I opened the file and realized that it was JSON. So that was probably, not the correct way to do that. Um, so, this is where if you needed further proof that I don't put a whole lot of direct detail forethought into what it is that I'm doing, there you go. We got the date published. That's handy. It's not pinned. It's not closed. It's not archived. There's its ID. We'll probably change the file name to make that a little bit nicer. There's the source of this. And this is another example of that thing I mentioned where I said the way that discourse works, if you were to look at any topic or any URL and you add .rss to the end, as long as it's a file, you end up with the data for that, or at least, that's the supposition. Maybe it needs to be something like more along that line. I've never tried it for one of those, but that URL was in there. Something to investigate. Oh, just the number. Excuse me. Well, I thought that's what I did, actually. Oh, we'll go ahead and test it again. All right. Well, maybe I'm just stupid. And that is the entirety of one particular entry in here. I'm assuming we also need to know, or I should say, it would be nice to know how many posts are in this thing, or if the published date changes from one thing to the next. It's one thing to be able to look at the result that we see next time and say, hey, there's an entry in here that didn't used to be in here. There must be a new topic. But necessarily, how do you determine if there's an update to an existing topic? I mean, clearly the summary detail knows way down at the end how many things there were. There were 2 participants and 2 posts. So that's, something to think about. Something else we could do here, um, just for testy purposes. And what we will actually do is, change that to be a JSON file because that seems like the smarter way to go. We'll delete this one. Then you don't have to keep fiddling with the thing. We could change the URL to JSON like so. And I'm not sure if it has the same structure, so this will probably blow up for other reasons. But maybe we'll move that up there. So it saves the feed data. Oh, yeah, that's not going to work either, is it? Shoot. Well, it'll be a dictionary. So, yeah, let's put that back to the way it was. We'll say save cache feed. We expected it to be a dictionary. We'll comment both of those out because I can't remember what the actual structure for this thing is. Okay. Oh. Not a fan of that, huh? Oh, yeah, I guess that thing can't actually parse the thing. My bad. Let's go ahead and just say something like stream.read. This is only interesting as part of this because maybe the JSON version of this actually has more information in it that will make our lives better than using the other version, in which case we don't need to use object of type bytes. Oh, whoops. Maybe we don't need to use that feed parser library at all. Okay, now. Yeah, you know what? That probably was not the correct way to pull that off. I think we probably could have just written it. Actually, we need to decode it and then encode it, right? I think that's what we need to do. I think we need to say data equals sublime dot decode value data, just as a quick neither here nor there, so we end up with a nicer content of the file. Otherwise, we're JSON encoding a JSON string, and life doesn't go very nice for us. So to see what fields we got in here, all the information on users we could ever care for, which for some reason doesn't indent in a nice fashion. Doop. All kinds of users in here. Again, I am assuming these are users that have done something. Now, this is why I looked at this earlier and thought it doesn't seem to have as much useful information in it. Bro, maybe it does. Maybe there's more in here than I thought. Primary groups. Let's see. The list of topics. Bumped at. Oh, well, maybe that's an interesting thing. There's an excerpt that is not HTML, unlike the other one, so that could be a reason to use the RSS feed version of this. Number of likes. I wonder why some of these end up being null. Original poster, most recent poster. 4 posts. There's a slug and a title. So that's the sort of thing that I guess will require a little bit more investigation. So let's go ahead and put things back to the way they were. We'll comment that out. We'll assume that's going to do that. We definitely want to do that. Let's say we definitely want to save it after that part. And we made it very unhappy. Oh, because that should be the RSS version of the feed so that it can do what it needs to do. Oh, yeah, also don't do that, right? There we go. See the brief flicker, and we have all of the stuff here. I guess we could also just store it as an array. This is one of those things that probably requires a little bit more research into what RSS is. That's not the sort of thing that I actually did here. Let's work on actually getting something like this to work a little bit better. And I'm curious to what those links actually represent. Mac Nibbles wrote. Oh, I see. It actually takes you to their profile page. Right. It's got all kinds of weird white space in it, which is, neither here nor there. How best to proceed here? Well, we actually need to be able to load this thing too, right? So with open cache file for reading as file, then data equals file.read. And then we might say what? Return json.decode. No, do it the other way. Sublime.decode value is the nicer way to do something like that. And these are things that probably should be error checked because that could totally fail. But, we've been over that whole production code versus will a thing work? Worry about making the code more robust when you're actually sure it's going to do something. That doesn't need to return a value. This does, but we might need to say, no, oh, it's os.path. Yeah, probably. If not, oh, actually, I guess we need the name of the file, right? File equals cache file. Call it once. If if not os.path.exists file or that's a dumb name for that, or not os.path.is file return none. These should be cached like so. Is that still? Yeah, it is. Okay. Let's comment that out for just a second. And we actually need the cache data for this, right? So let's say cache is equal to none. Feeling our way through actually how we want this to work. Cache equals load cache. And then we could say print loaded cache. And then that. What does that do? That does all kinds of stuff. Right on. So now we have something that's cached and we can actually load data. Now for our purposes here, let's say feed equals cache instead of that, which is going to break our stuff later because we totally decided that we're going to store that in a slightly different format, but maybe that's an argument for not doing so. No. Let's go ahead and we'll leave that as such. Now we have this here. Let's go ahead and jump that over here and also open help in case we need it. Okay. So I guess what we would like to do, maybe just for our purposes here, is let's gloss over, because we're, only got like a half an hour here, gloss over the idea that all of this should be happening in a background thread of some sort. Because if you can make code work, then you can kick off a function call in response to formatting or starting a thread. So that's not much of an issue. That was very easy to do even in the YouTuberizer code during November. I'm not going to worry about error handling here per se. And because I'm not entirely sure exactly how RSS feeds work, vis-a-vis the dates that are in them and the one that spits out discourse in particular, I'm not 100% sure how to determine if any one entry has been updated since the last time. What we could actually do is see if there's something newer than what there used to be and do something in that case. I don't know how hip and happening the forum is being over here right now. So that's the sort of thing that kind of makes it tricky to test that sort of thing without constantly hammering on it. But I guess the thing to focus on is what if we actually wanted to know about something? Now, there's two things to take into account here. One is if we were to determine that there are one or more new posts, how do we convey that to the user? Because we don't really have the ability. We can create a dialog box that will pop up, but I think that's one of those whack someone in the head with a doorknob, sack of doorknobs kind of things, because you'd just be busy working and all of a sudden a dialog box pops up, and best case scenario, while you're typing, you hit the space bar and that closes the dialog. So that's probably not the way to go. And apart from that, there's not a lot of good ways to call attention to something. We could display some text in the status bar, but that sort of thing might not gather your attention. So that might not be great. We could inject a phantom into the buffer underneath the current line with a little X to close it. So while you're working, something would just appear underneath the line and say, hey, there's a new forum post. That might be something. And those are the sorts of things that you sort of have to think about and play with and see how obtrusive they are. Um, but let's say that we've done that and we can tell the user that there's something to show them, but there's something that's new. One thing that could do is just immediately launch the browser on the forum. But as we can see, we can actually, to some large degree, display the content of their message. So maybe that's something that we might be interested in here. Because the nice thing about this is these HTML tabs will hang around even after a quit and a restart, which is not something that normally works for other things. Boy, that took longer than one might have expected for that to work out. Well, the startup time was zero point 0.6 of a second, so whatever was doing it, it was not this. Now, the funny thing is the font that this is using is kind of funky. So let's say we develop a module, something for displaying a particular entry. Def display entry. And let's say we need the entry data and the window that it's going to appear in. And if that was the case, let's go ahead and do, nope, one more, nope, crap. I lost track of my, oh, I put it over here. What thing are we actually interested in here? The actual first one? Let's say we're interested in doing something with this one, just because. And after the cache, we could say display entry, and we could say cache that. Oh, it already had quotes. And sublime.active window. And if that was the case, then this should get invoked. Unhashable type window? What now? Oh, whoops. Displaying a thing. Righty tighty, great on. Okay. Now that's going to display this entry for us so we can actually do something with it. Now all we have to know is how to do that. Well, I guess I kind of had a thing like that before, right? The name of the sheet is window.new HTML sheet, and we need to give it a title and content. And then we save the file, we get a tab with the title and a content, which is kind of what we want, except for not really. And I guess the other weird thing about this is there a way to find the name or tab associated with an existing sheet? That doesn't work. That returns none. It would actually return the name of a file if it was an image, but that doesn't help us here. Text sheet, text sheet, text sheet, text sheet, HTML sheet. So that's something we could do. Whoops. Window.sheets one.title. No, that's not going to work. I already did that, right? That doesn't work. It has a name, it has a that. All we can test is the content of the thing. That's kind of a hole in the whole sheet API, isn't it? How do you reuse a sheet? Presumably you don't. I guess you got to be very careful about that then. We can comment out that because we don't need it. We can remove that. And whoops, this is going to be entry.title, like so. So when we do it, it has the actual thing in it, right? And then we actually have the content. So we might actually want to say content equals fix content entry content. That's actually the thing, right? I'm not screwing myself. No, it's not the thing. It's named summary. I almost did the same thing that I did earlier. And then we can say def, well, I guess we should probably call it prepare content. And then this could be prepare content. So essentially it's doing nothing to it right now, but there's probably more to it that we actually want to do. So we might actually say template equals. And then what could we actually say? And that doesn't actually, white space doesn't actually matter, right? So we might want something like that. And do we actually care about a title in this thing? Probably not. Let's pretend you need the style in the head. Is that a thing you do? I'm not entirely sure, to be perfectly honest, but we'll leave it for now. Body slash body, and then this would be, whoops, return templates.format content equals content. And, you know, there's not really a way for us to tell that that's doing anything except that it didn't seem to do squat. So there's that. Just for testing purposes. Still no. Oh, because it's very sensitive about the HTML it uses, isn't it? Yeah. Mini HTML kind of pinches me like that sometimes. So let's see what we ended up with in here. A paragraph. This part's definitely breaking because block quotes don't work. It really seems like that is something that should work inside of a body. I mean, maybe I'm just crazy. Oh, maybe I shouldn't be an idiot and do that. Yeah, I guess that kind of looks like this, doesn't it? I don't do HTML a lot. Not a fan of it. Okay. Now, those tabs are long, but that actually works. So next thing we need to do is maybe throw some sort of style information in here. And here I'm going to cheat and go into override audit and check the display. Yeah, that one. What did I do in this one to get this to do a thing that I wanted to do? I guess I didn't have a full thing, did I? No, I'm pretty sure I did. It's way down here. Header metadata overrides. Oh, all right. I guess not. How did the CSS get into this thing, though? I have CSS in here, man. I know I do. Package, oh, I see. That's the part I'm looking for. Package pop-up. Let's zoom that out. They help for various things. There's the CSS that we're using, and here's package pop-up. All right, so I just used body. That's good to know. I'm going to zoom this over to this desktop for just a second. Be mildly concerned about how much smaller the font looks now. And I mean, this isn't really a pop-up, so maybe we don't need to fiddle with something like that. Nah, We'll go with the tried and true, it worked kind of sitch. So there was actually a style/style on this thing, and then there is CSS inside. Well, I guess it doesn't need to be indented because that's not as interesting as it could be. Actually, I named this body before, so that probably makes sense. And there's an ID value in here. ID equals forum reader post. Thusly. And then I can say body CSS equals CSS and body equals content. Then we need a very quick little underscore CSS equals something like that. And we're sort of doing what we want. Now let's say, what did I actually use for CSS over here? Because maybe we want to tweak this bad boy a little bit. Let's see. I did body, font family, system. Does that make it look any different? I suppose. Let's say div.blockQuote border 1 pix solid white. Just to give it a try. Now what we actually want to do here is say content.replace block quote with div class equals block quote. But we probably want to do that in a smarter way than that. If I had to guess, like this. And then, can you do this sort of cascade to Jiggy? Oh, come on, man. I find it amazing that I don't like web development as much as I don't, but for some reason I end up finding a way to do it. And yeah, it doesn't like that, huh? Yeah, I was afraid of that. That's too bad, because that kind of looks not too terrible. All right, let's go ahead and join them up into one ugly line. Worry about it later. Oh, the whole thing is a block quote? Well, I mean, that's irritating in the extreme, but I guess it makes sense. Let's modify things here a little bit. What's the good padding? Well, I guess I added a margin, right? 1 rem. No, I guess that's probably better as a padding. Yeah. Whoops, don't do that, man. Yeah, that looks a little better. Solid light gray. Dark gray. Obviously, how you would actually pick that depends on more than just this. So that's one thing that we could do here. So we could actually see some stuff. Now there's actually links in here. And for this, we need to go to the local Sublime Text directory, into the lib, and into the Python 38. And make sheet. Neat. Nope. Whoops. We want new HTML sheet. A command is a thing that we need. Flags are transient. Group is where it goes. So let's say we want a command. Let's go ahead and jump back to, do I have enough files open here now? I think I have enough out of this one that I don't need it anymore. So we'll go ahead and get rid of that one. And now there's the forum read'em. There's this. We probably don't need that anymore. Yeah, go ahead and do something like that. That seems like it's probably okay. We got way too much stuff going on here. And command. If command was echo, oh, whoops. When we click on a link, we get to see the URL that we're clicking on so that we know that it's something we can do something with, right? So there's that, and there's this. Those aren't clickable. Doop doop. And now would be a great time for me to remember how you open a URL. Web browser.open. User URL. Something like that. Import web browser. We actually need to define a command now so that we can actually do something with it. So let's say we say class Sublime Forum link. Follow Sublime Forum link command, which I guess is going to be a Sublime window command. It actually be an application command. There only needs to be one. It's not related to any particular window or any particular file. Run, and it's going to take an argument of URL. And there. Yeah, I am aware. Thank you very much. And follow Sublime Forum link. Alrighty. That's going to be here. Follow Sublime Forum link. So if I was to click on this, we're going to make sure that's the active browser. If I click on this, here's Vanessa's page. That's handy. And if I was to click on this, there's that. So that's handy. Now that comes down to images. I would imagine we could do something very similar to what we're doing to load the actual data to load the image, right? Now, clearly, when you call read on that thing, it gives you bytes. So we could do something with that. What's the best way to do that, though? Because you want to save it as a temporary file, but you need that temporary file to hang around so that it can actually be displayed. Or you could try to encode it as a data URL, which could be, big. Let's see. Python encode image as data URL. Oh, is it just really just a base 64 encode? I can never remember what that actually looks like. So something along the lines of this, I guess. Base 64, boop, boop. We want these lines here. Fortunately for us, we're working in a version of Python that we can actually do something like this in. So let's copy both of those lines. And for our purposes here, I'm just going to paste them at the bottom here and comment it out because we need to test this in a nicer way. So if we zoom this out, I am image source equals, we need to pull one of these. Oh, and it's relative to something. Oh, man. Life just gets less and less fun. Oh, stop doing that. Why would you do that to me? Why would you do that to me? I asked you not to do that to me. I probably should have just used a find to capture this stupid thing. This is the thing we want. That. And the summary detail is coming from that. That's the base of that thing, right? Well, we won't worry about that for now. Let's say URL is equal to this. forum.sublimetext.com/that. And if this was the URL, what do we see if we actually go there? Let's try it and see. That looks like some sort of ginormous image. So that's handy. Okay. Now we get back to this thing and actually look at the code we're doing something with, which certainly isn't that. And it's something more like this. Import URL lib, right? And then we say x equals URL lib dot requests dot URL open that, but that's not going to work because we're going to need to, no, don't do that. We're going to need to throw that, whoops, that line in here. Oh, man. Certify and context equals SSL dot. Now see, nice. I closed that notes thing because I didn't think I needed it. And then I totally got to find that thing that I was probably already looking at that I did not see. Yeah, it's right there. SSL dot create default context with the CA file being certify.where. Oh. Right on, right on. So we get back to that thing that didn't work and say context equals context, like that. And now image data is equal to x.read. Image data is something binary, so that's looking good. And then we import base 64, and then we can say encoded equals base 64 dot b64 encode that thing that I just called that I can't remember what it is, and there's a lot of it in this stupid image. And I screwed my whole scroll back buffer, and I'm real unhappy about it now. You wouldn't believe how unhappy it is. You know what? I could have just cut the other thing and pasted it in and had less trouble. Or I could be using the scroll thumb here, but I'm not used to having to scroll so far back. Ay, okay, yeah, it's somewhere between the top of the thing and there. Thank you. Various things went a little pear-shaped. I did call it image data. All right, well, that was dumb. Image data. I've encoded it. This is very exciting. I'm not going to try to print that one because I think we know what's going to happen. Image URL is equal to data image /png, which is clearly not correct because this isn't a PNG file, so that's an issue with this as well. Uh, base 64, comma loop dot format encoded. Sublime dot set clipboard image URL. So now I could totally paste it into a thing. Look at it. Look how much of it there is. That's so cool. All right. Now, unfortunately for me, that's actually not the information that I technically needed. Uh, prepare content. Content equals image source equals %s. Comment that one out. Whoa, no. Whoops. I forgot the starty string thing. This is a line that's so long that it can't syntax highlight. Invalid syntax. Well, that's unfortunate. Oh. Oh dear. Image decode failed. Hey, where have I heard that before? Anyway, that's probably not a good way to do something like that. Um, so we'll go ahead and strip that out. What was that thing we said? Maybe we could download this image file and store it inside of a temporary file. Well, how are we looking for time? We're kind of looking like the stream is up, but my dog ran away. I think we should probably call it there. This actually worked better than I thought it would. Now, we did get to do a fair bit of stuff, even though I wasn't quite sure what CSS is. But all else being equal, I think that is actually not too shabby of an example of a thing that we might actually want to do here. So let us go ahead and end up the old stream here. So there we have it. We have worked up some modicum of what we might say prototype for this. Not as much of a prototype as the last couple of streams have been, but again, the only thing that I really, pardon me, the only thing that I really, the only thing that I really pre-tested this time around was the ability to pull the RSS feed down and parse it out quickly and easily. And even at that, I only spent like 10, 15 minutes max playing around with that. It all went very smoothly as these things go. And then I didn't want to do anything else because I wanted to explore it here in the stream. So you get a sense of often when you're doing things, not just Sublime plugin things, but just programming things in general, sometimes you feel your way around. Now, certainly, instead of playing with things, I could have done no end of research to find exactly everything that I might need to know. But, where's the fun in that? And that's not how I roll. But when someone asks for a plugin or when I have a plugin idea, I form an idea in my head for how it could work and then try to build on it from there, which, for better or for worse, seems to have set me in good stead. The problem that we have with this is perhaps HTML sheets aren't quite there, and I'm not familiar enough with RSS to be able to detect when things are new. But, all else being equal, that's not entirely shabby as an example of something that we might be interested in doing. So Hopefully you've found this interesting, and if you have any questions or comments or requests for clarification about anything that happened here, you can feel free to drop those down in the comment section below this, and I will get back to you. You can also drop any message like that on any of the messages or any of the videos rather on this channel or my other channel, which is linked down in the description of this video, where I do weekly Sublime Text videos. And starting on April 6th, the first of the video series of package and plugin development, which is kind of like these live streams, but more focused and less bug related, because I actually do that forethought thing before I jump in and, there's editing. So if there was any of this that you didn't quite follow, didn't understand, you might want to subscribe to the other channel and get a little bit of that action going. And if this was any other thing, I would probably be able to display the subscribe for more videos thing, but it seems to be a but at times. So I'm not entirely sure how well it worked. Actually, I think I didn't even, oh, actually, I did add that thing. Wait a second. Silly me. I totally did not notice that there is one of these things. So check it out. Let's see. If you would like to see regular Sublime Text videos, which drop every Monday at 9 a.m. Pacific on my alternate channel, check the link down in the description and subscribe up for those. They are all sorts of tutorials. There's tutorials on how to use Sublime Text, how the features in it work that you might be unfamiliar with, how to configure it, how to work with your color schemes, all that sort of good stuff. And starting in April, the first videos that drop in April are going to be the videos on how to do package and plugin development in Sublime Text. And we're going to be starting with the very basics, what views and windows and things like that are, and discussing all of the classes. And then once we get that base information set aside, which will take a fair number of videos according to my outline, then we can jump into just tutorial videos on all of the questions that people have when they're working on specific things. We could probably intersperse those in as well. There's a certain amount of core plugin knowledge that you need to have so that we can discuss how you could create a command to do a thing without having to constantly backtrack with a view is this, a region is this, a selection is this, and things like that. We want to have that information sort of in the can to refer to as it will. On the other hand, if you prefer these live stream type things, which I'm doing once a week, you can, of course, feel free to subscribe for more streams here on this channel instead of the other one. And I go live every Tuesday at 8 p.m. Pacific. Unfortunately, I don't really have the time within my week, even with things being the way they are in the world, to stream at other times. Although I really wish I did, because I love to just hop on here for a couple of hours and play around and chat with people. But that is not to be. But I am here. I schedule streams in advance. And if you have an idea for something that you'd like to see in one of these live streams, drop that down in any of the comment sections on any of the videos here. And you can also tweet those suggestions over to me as well if that's the sort of thing that you would like to do. And we can do a live stream on that. And don't forget, you can always ask questions down in the chat section of the live stream if you happen to be watching it live. Otherwise, you have to drop those in the comment section. But that's really all we have here for this particular stream. I'm going to call it here because it is starting to get a little bit late and I still have some non-Sublime Text related chores before the night is over. So this is OdatNurd thanking you for watching. If you've gotten all this far, remember to do all that subscribey, likey, sharey business. And until the next live stream or the next video on the other channel, have a sublime day. I have friends that do live streams, and he tends to spin his chair around and say "wee" as his wife is turning off the stream. I'm uh, I'm willing to bet that would not be a good idea for me because I'm connected with a headset cable.